Oh, hello everyone. Welcome in, Shruti streamers. Shruti, thanks for the raid. Al, Gidget raid. Hello everyone. I saw Nikki Rosecat said it was their first live bug hunt. Welcome, welcome. Glad you could be here. Oh, Chatterino was still going off. Yes, hello everyone. Hello, Momtomology. Roxers, Rainbow Pixie Farts, Granny, Gracie Paws Honeydew, Flick, Mac is in the building, Sam Monstera, Leonard, Logan. Hello, hello, hello. How are we doing this week, guys? Anybody find any cool bugs that they'd like to report? Silvera found a house centipede. Yes. Awesome. I those are really, really rare in Arizona, and I used to find them in the house all the time growing up. But like since I've been into bugs, I don't know that I've seen one, which is really embarrassing because they're supposed to be pretty common household things. Uh, but I did learn recently that there's actually a second species that we have in the U.S. now. It used to be just the one, but now we have a second, which is pretty cool. I think it was introduced, which is less cool, but yeah, house centipedes are neat. I'm a big fan, even though most people don't like how leggy they are. Donk has found him in Animal Crossing. Hey, that counts. Marie Melia, earwigs. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Been too cold for bugs. That's all right, you know. Warming up here soon. A little bit cooler here this week than last week, so we'll see what the activity is like tonight, but ooh, Tortilla found the bad kind of bug. The kind in programming or projects. They know how many bugs have. Yeesh. Yeesh, Donkus. Calling me out. Hello. People how to fly. Pickle Cat. What do you suggest you do with house bugs when it's snowing outside but you don't want them indoors? I feel bad if it's too cold for them outside. Um, that's a tricky question because there's not really like a good answer for that. Uh, I understand not wanting to put them outside, but relocating them somewhere else in your house isn't probably what you're looking to do. Um, it's not part of it that we like to think about a whole lot, but insects are a very, very big part of most natural ecosystem food chains. And even if you do put it outside, there's likely a bird or a small mammal or even other insects that are active when it's cold out that could potentially benefit from the meal. So unfortunately, I don't have like a great answer for you. uh, do whatever you think is best for your situation. Um, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Ice cream tub ants. Oh, Daenerys, that's cool. If you don't mind saying which zoo. Uh, this past weekend, Nick was here, Alveus Nick, and we did some streaming at local AZA institutions around here, and we went to the Phoenix Zoo, and they unfortunately don't have much of a like a bug house or anything like that, but they do have uh, a lot of native desert species on exhibit. So they've got desert hairy scorpions and the blue death veining beetles, and of course our native tarantulas and stuff as well. But no big bug house, and that's always a little sad. Oh, the Oregon Zoo. Great. Cool. I've never been to that one, but I'd like to visit at some point. What are we seeing here? Oh, Granny, speaking of ants, how is Andromeda? So, for chat who may have missed me talking about it, one of my local entomologist friends brought me some specimens, some beetles that he had collected, and with them, he also dropped off a little vial that had a pretty big ant in it. Uh, and I have never ventured into keep. Oh, NR Rex, thanks for the raid. Um, I've never kept ants before, like myself. I did work in an ant lab for 2 years, and part of my job was like maintaining our colonies, but I've never started one from like a singular queen ant. And so I went out and I bought test tubes and I got deionized water and I made this little test tube house for her. And I am happy to report she has laid 4 eggs as of yesterday. Uh, so this is going to be a pretty fun process, I think. Um, I tend to get into hobbies really, really hard and fast when I pick up something new. So maybe I'll become an ant guy sometime in the future. But for right now, we just have Andromeda, my queen Veramis or ant. Nuclear snake. Beetles getting into my flat all the time through the vent in my bathroom. Good bug repellents that are non-toxic to cats. I do not know much about bug repellent strategies because that is usually the complete opposite of my motivations. Um, if you're in the bug Discord, Nuclear Snake, if you can post pictures of what kind of beetles they are, or if you know offhand, I might be able to find some better information for you. But unfortunately, offhand, I do not. I do not know. Oh yeah, 4 eggs. Everybody. Sorry, y'all. Catching up on chat. I always have to stop y'all to read, but oh, super terrific. Found a common spitting spider. That's so. Spitting spiders are really neat. Uh, we found one on cams one time, and like, we got video of it hunting. I I don't have I don't have a way to pull that up right now, but someone might find the clip later. And if they do, I can post it in the Discord. Um, Shruti, that's so cool. She said, once we move into a house that we're going to live in for a long time, I dream about having an ant colony. Yeah, I had ants as a kid. I did have um an ant colony at some point. But when you get the ant colonies that they sell, like specifically for children, they send you worker ants only. And so they live for a while. They do their whole thing. They excavate tunnels and they collect food and all that stuff. But once they reach the end of their natural lifespans, they cannot reproduce because they're all worker ants. So if you are maintaining an ant colony and you have like a full blown the adult term for it is formicarium. But if you have like an ant farm that's a self-sustaining colony, you need to have a queen ant in there, because queen ants are the only kind that can actually lay the eggs. So, uh, you can try and start them like I'm doing from just a singular queen, but there are also websites that you can get ants local to your area. So if they do happen to get out, it's a non-ecological disaster, and we'd like to prevent that as much as possible. But you can also get like starter colonies or find colonies with queens in the wild, and observe them like that. But yeah, I'm excited to see what this is all about, because I did start wanting to keep ants when I was early on in my entomology career, and I went to the one professor at my university that had a bunch of ants, to ask her about if she had any specific tips or care or like what species I should start with. And she said, "Oh, well, why don't you just come and like volunteer or work in my lab for a little bit to see if you want, uh if you enjoy it enough basically to do it on your own." And so I did. Shruti getting her sub in. That's awesome. Um and so I started working in that lab, and we had a lot of colonies, and I kind of took over feeding all those colonies. We had like 30 or 40 of them, and it was really neat, and I didn't really have any reason not to, but it felt like I was taking too much work home at that point of like, I was working taking care of ants, and I would also be working and taking care of my own ants at home. So I just never got into it. And then when I started keeping all my other stuff, my other tarantulas and stuff like that, uh I've always been worried about the ants like somehow escaping and getting into and like attacking and hurting my other bugs. So that's why I hadn't gone for ants before now, really. But we're gonna see where this one goes. I know enough ant people that I'm like pretty confident I can make a setup that's escape proof, or at least, I won't be losing like thousands and thousands of ants at a time. So we'll see. I'll if it goes well, I'll update y'all on the progress as we keep going. But yeah, I have one ant right now. Do I have any ant people that are also ants? AUNTS. Um, Surely. Uh, yeah. I don't know offhand which of my aunt friends have nieces and nephews, but like, yes, I'm sure there's at least one. Hey, Cricket, welcome in. First, I, I was gonna make a silly joke, and then I saw that Donkus beat me to it. Cricket showed up and said, Donkus said, "Look, a bug." Michael, for you, have you ever seen the movie Eight-Legged Freaks? It's been a long time. Um, when I was teaching the general entomology classes, we would have, uh, like before they turned in pieces of their collection, we would have pinning parties, quote unquote. So in the classroom, we would like get pizza. The students would be working on their insect collections, and we would put. I'm doing real heavy air quotes. Y'all can't see it, but quote bug themed movies up on the big projectors in the classroom. And we would start, of course, with things like uh, A Bug's Life, or um, Ants, or even Life in the Undergrowth, which is like a docu-series and not an actual movie. But then we would get into weird stuff like Them, which is an old horror movie about ants. Arachnophobia, which is a classic one that I saw when I was growing up. And it's really fun to like watch those things and pick up the accurate entomology information. I know we've talked about Bug's Life before and how much like actual bug science they incorporate into that. But then the whole plot of Arachnophobia, spoilers for a probably like 25-year-old movie at this point, um, is that tarantulas get out, and these tarantulas establish in this little small town, and it's like becoming a big problem. And at the very end, there's a scene where they go down into the basement, and the basement is just like covered in webs. And tarantulas don't really make webs like that. And as a kid, of course, that was like, oh wow, super spooky, scary. This makes sense. Like those are big spiders. There's obviously going to be a lot of webs, and that's just like not how it is. So it's both fun and also like really annoying to know too much for the movie. Uh, when we also do that, we run out of movies at some point that are like actually bug related. So like we would always watch Jurassic Park because that is one of my top five, personally, my top five favorite movies of all time. And I can do a little bug lesson on the misidentification of the mosquito in Jurassic Park. While we're talking about that, we would watch James and the Giant Peach sometimes. We watched Ant-Man one year. We did like Into the Spider-Verse. Basically, if we could make it like vaguely related to entomology, we ended up watching it on the big screen. So uh, it's fun. It's always fun. Knowing about Nicole says knowing about trees ruins all viewing experiences for me because everything's filmed in Vancouver. Yeah, I've also started noticing. For those of you that maybe don't know, but I don't know how you've missed it to this point, I've gotten into birds in the past couple years. I'm a pretty serious birder now, so in addition to bugs, I'm out identifying birds all the time. I'm starting to recognize bird calls that they use in like TV and movies that don't make sense and don't match the locations. And that's also like a really annoying, pedantic thing at this point. Uh, Rebecca asks an interesting question. Would you ever be a consultant for a movie like that? I wouldn't say no. Um, but there are like Hollywood entomologists, as weird as that sounds. Um, there's a guy that I'm friends with who Maya also met when we were at that conference last year, who raises insects basically for Hollywood sets. So he has Hercules beetles and spiders and scorpions and stuff like that. And so when they film documentaries, um, I'm going to spoiler alert this too. I don't know if this is like super widely known, but a lot of times documentaries aren't filmed like on site. They're oftentimes set up in naturalistic looking areas, but then they use uh like these Hollywood bugs, which are real bugs, by the way. I'm not saying that these are like fake in any way. They're just not going out like to the jungle and finding all these live bugs all the time, because that requires a lot of camera equipment traveling usually around the world, and it's a lot easier to like make a realistic jungle scene and put someone's pet scorpion in it. So yeah, there's a guy that I know that raises beetles and scorpions and all this other stuff for uh like Hollywood movies. And um I think he was the guy that provided the tarantula for Home Alone when they filmed that. Silvera, someone's got to make an Attack of the Giant Ground Beetles or something. I would love that. The only ground beetle depiction that I am aware of in like very popular media is at the beginning of Fargo, and the narration is talking about bark beetles. And they're talking about bark beetles and how they're infesting everything, but the bug that they're actually putting on screen is a ground beetle. There was a Twitter account that Amanda's here. Hello. Um, there was a Twitter account that I used to run with a friend of mine called On the Bug Screen, and we would post and do our best to identify insects in media. So not just things like that where they like had a documentary running and they had the thing misidentified, but like cartoon movies like Coraline has some silverfish in it, which is pretty cool. The Madagascar hissing cockroaches that they find in Men in Black. So we would tweet out like fun facts about that stuff, but it's been a while. Twitter doesn't even exist anymore. I don't really use it. I'm pretty sure we lost the account at some point. So that was fun, but it is kind of interesting to see what's out there and like what gets used to get portrayed in movies. What was the fly on the guy's forehead in Troll 2? I haven't seen Troll 2, so that's another thing. I'm bad at seeing movies. Flumgoon, care to elaborate on the Jurassic Park and the mosquito? Yes. Yes, I would love to. So, in Jurassic Park, there's the scene where they're explaining how they get the dinosaur DNA. And in the one scene, the first one where they're actually like drilling into the amber, it's not a mosquito, it's a crane fly. And they probably did that because crane flies are bigger. They're a very close relative of mosquitoes, they're in the same suborder. So superficially, they look a lot like a mosquito. And some of you might know them as like mosquito eaters. They're like really, really big, very leggy flies like mosquitoes are. They get called mosquito eaters, but they don't really eat mosquitoes. That's like a whole other thing. Um, but then about 10 seconds later, they switch the bug. You can see I have a slide for this because I talk about it when I do my cultural entomology lectures. I will definitely post this in the Discord for tonight's recap. And so right after they have the crane fly, they switch over to an actual mosquito, which is like very cool. They actually did get a mosquito. However, the mosquito that they put in there is a male. You can tell because the palps are very, very long. They're pretty kind of fuzzy. And as we've talked about before, male mosquitoes don't feed on blood. Female mosquitoes are the only mosquitoes that bite because uh, they get the protein to be able to lay their eggs from a blood meal. So if you have ever been bitten by a mosquito, that was a female mosquito. So they put a male mosquito in the amber. So, strike one. Strike two is that they used a genus of mosquito that even the females don't feed on blood. So not only did they use a male mosquito, they did use a male mosquito, but they used a they used a male mosquito of a group that even the females don't feed on blood. Now, I know I just said that all mosquitoes need the blood meal with the females to get the protein to lay eggs. Within entomology, there are very, very few rules that don't have exceptions because insects are super, super diverse and there seems to be like an exception to every rule. The genus they used is Toxorhynchites, Toxorhynchites, I think, Chites, something along those lines. But those ones, they're they have predatory larvae. So mosquito larvae are laid in water. That's why you get them when you have standing water around in the summertime, or you have like a tire in your backyard that gets filled with water and you get a lot of mosquitoes. Toxorynchites lay their eggs in water with other mosquitoes, but their larvae are predatory on other mosquitoes. And so the female larvae stay in the water longer and they feed on the other mosquitoes, and they just use that like leftover stored protein from eating all of the other mosquito larvae to lay their eggs as adults. So it's a very cool genus. They're really big too. They're called elephant mosquitoes a lot of the time, and their proboscis is curved. So instead of having like a straight down little straw, it sort of goes out and comes down at like a little 90-degree angle. And that's because they don't need it to be super functional to actually suck up blood like typical mosquitoes do. So that is my soapbox, I don't know, soapbox, rabbit hole, whatever you want to call it, about the mosquito in Jurassic Park. It starts off as a crane fly, and then they do actually switch it to a mosquito, but they switch it to a mosquito that's a male, so males don't drink blood to begin with. And even if it was a female, they picked a genus where the females do not feed on blood. And I don't think that's like necessarily a bad choice. Uh, Obviously, they picked that mosquito because it's a really big mosquito, and it'd be easier to film and like look better on camera. So like I get why they did it. They probably didn't expect entomologists to like pick it apart and go through and like specifically zoom in and identify what type of bug they were putting in there. But here we are. Here I am at least picking through this and making a big deal about it. But that doesn't stop it from being a top 5 movie of all time for me. Okay, let's see. What were we saying? Let's see. Tortilla made cookies, but didn't bring enough to share. That's quite rude. Pengo, so they use the proboscis for feeding on nectar. So male mosquitoes primarily do feed on nectar. So half of all mosquitoes are actually very important pollinators because the males, while the females are feeding on blood and getting the bad rep for, biting people, the males are really, really underrated pollinators because they're feeding on the nectar down in the flower. So they have a similar proboscis structure, but rather than feeding on blood, they're feeding on like the sugary liquid at the base of flowers. And in Toxorynchites, that group that we were just talking about, the elephant mosquitoes, the males and females feed on nectar, so they both pollinate. Flamgoon, did that genus exist back then? Man, I don't know. I can look that up, but I'm not sure when. I'm not sure when we actually figured if we have fossil evidence of like Toxorynchites. But mosquitoes were almost certainly around by then. Like the family of mosquitoes. Just imagine how the paleontologist felt. Yeah, that's true. Mayhem, it's not mosquitoes. So Mayhem said, "Don't mosquitoes pollinate the cacao plant? Like where we get chocolate." It's not a mosquito, but it's sort of like the crane fly. It's another close relative. Um, it's a ceratopogonid, I think, which is a type of biting midge. So it's another fly that people don't really like because they bite. But there's this one group that is the sole pollinator of the cacao tree, like the plant where we get chocolate. And so without having that fly specifically, there would be no chocolate because the the plant is so specialized to only get pollinated by that specific thing. And yeah, I think it's a ceratopagonid, or a biting midge. So not a mosquito, but still pretty close. Cat bite. Yeah. Yeah, no, Osprey, no problem. It was a good question. And that's like one of my facts that I bring out during the uh Halloween entomology lectures when I'm teaching class in person. Obviously I bring in candy for my students because I'm a cool TA like that. Um and we talk about chocolate, uh and the candy that we have there, and we talk about chocolate and like how that's related to insects, and that the little ceratopagonid is the only thing that pollinates the chocolate. But another thing that we always talk about is in things like nerds, nerds candy, and like the outside coating of M&Ms and jelly beans and stuff like that. uh those are often dyed red with a product called carmine or carmic acid, which is an insect based dye. So if you've ever heard of cochineal scale, down here in the Southwest, there are these little like white fuzzy things uh, that are little scale insects that grow on cacti. They have a little straw. They look plunge their little straw mouth into the cactus, and they feed on all the juice in the cactus. But if you go over and squish them, oh, we got an ant. We got oh, elbozo ant fell off. Um, if you crush those scale insects that are on the cacti, it puts out this like very very bright, vibrant red stuff that like stains your fingers. And so Native Americans and traditional peoples throughout Mexico would basically like farm these. They would grow them on cacti on purpose and then brush them off, dry them, grind them up into this little bright red powder, and then they would use it to dye textiles and clothing and things like that. Uh, and people still dye clothes that way, but these things are farmed in mass, specifically to make that red dye. And so on products, you'll see it as carmine or carmic acid, and it's not just in candy. So you'll see it also in like a lot of yogurt, any of your like strawberry Yoplait or whatever, anything that has like fruit in it that they dye red will oftentimes have carmine or carmic acid listed as a natural color thing. Um, and I know there was like a big hullabaloo with Starbucks a couple years ago because they were, I don't remember what it was, but they had some like new pink drink that they were advertising it as being vegan. And then it was getting color from this karmic acid, and so there was this big debate over whether insect products like counted, quote unquote, if you were being participating in vegan, being a vegan. Yeah, I see. I see. Tortilla mentioned it. Um, but that's not the only bug thing that they use in candy. The shiny coating on the outside of things like Mike and Ike's and hot tamales and stuff like that is made from shellac, which you may be familiar um, with like a furniture polish. Shellac is like a thing you can paint over furniture to make it nice and shiny and glossy. And it's the same shellac that is on the outside of a lot of candy. And it is rebranded not as shellac and not as scale insect juice or whatever. It's on your packaging as confectioner's glaze. And just like the cochineal and just like the carmine in the red dye, shellac and confectioner's glaze is to make things shiny. And it again comes from drying and grinding up scale insects. the lac scale. The species is Lacifera lacca. Um, and yeah, so it's a scale insect that makes this like really shiny extra coating, and they use it to put the shine on the outsides of candy. And then the other product that you might see with insect stuff in it, um, that always comes around with the holidays, like with Halloween specifically, is in jelly beans. Jelly Belly jelly beans specifically have the trifecta. They've got carmine, they've got confectioner's glaze, and they have beeswax. So beeswax is added to so many different products. But in jelly beans, it's like one of the things that makes them so chewy, you know? Uh, if Shrudy's still here, she can tell us about her Tutti Frutti, uh, Tutti Frutti jelly bean and crested gecko food that she had a bite of tonight on her stream. Um, but yeah, so Jelly Belly jelly beans have beeswax in them to make them chewy. They have the confectioner's glaze on the outside of them to make them shiny. And then if it's any of the various red flavors, um, it most likely has carmic acid or carmine listed as an ingredient as well. So whenever I do presentations around there, Amanda, yeah, she got a good flavor, but she ate it with she had another wheel spin for eat eat pet food, and she took some of the little powdered food that they feed the geckos, and that was probably not the best, because I know I've tried the Rapashi bug burger and it is not tasty at all. Nuclear snake. Crippling fear of insects. I never would have guessed. You're so active in here and you come to bug hunts, but I'm glad you're okay enough with them to come in and learn from this stuff. So at least welcome in for that. But that is an interesting distinction. Because I've told people about the insect products in like food things, and they're like, oh, gross, but then they like don't think about it again. But then when I suggest, like, I have many times talked about my mealworm tacos or eating a cricket or like eating insects as an alternative protein source, that's where people draw the line. And I think it's really interesting of like, I'm fine eating bug as long as I can't tell that I'm eating bug. Like there's a psychological difference there that like I get to some extent of like popping a cricket in your mouth versus like a cricket being ground up into flour and then incorporated into something, you know. Something about the legs probably does it for people, but yeah, most people are fine with the bug products cuz like they don't know about it really. That red dye is in a ton of products, and nobody ever questions it. Gecko wasn't bad. It's slightly weird baby food. Bagel, how many of you are eating rapashi? You just gotta try it. You know, if you've got pets that are eating this stuff and it's not like immediately repulsive, like I would never. We're getting off the rails here. This is not bug hunt talk, but like I wouldn't eat cat food because it looks and smells gross. But like a relatively harmless powder, uh, yeah, I'm a little curious what it tastes like. I'm not gonna say I haven't tried Bug Burger, and I'm apparently not the only one, so that's on that. Donkus. Don't want to know what or where their food comes from. Disconnect with chicken, beef, and pork. That's a really interesting thought. Uh, and yeah, you're probably right. There is that disconnect of like where food comes from and what that means. Oh, we got a bug, I think. I'm seeing pixels right now, but that looks like a bug. Parrots pelleted food. Huh. Pickle, pickle cat. I should clarify. Bug Burger is a brand of powdered food for feeding insects. So, like cockroaches, I used to use it for isopods. I still use it for my cockroach colonies. It is not a burger made out of bugs, though I am not opposed to that. That is not the product that I am talking about. It's like a powder that you mix with water and make like a I don't know what the term is for, like a slurry out of it, and you feed it to insects. It's moving like a beetle, y'all. It's kind of got that like lumbering, not super coordinated approach, but that is a blob, sure, if I've ever seen one. Oh, it's gone. I don't have to worry about it now. Sleep paralysis demon soot sprite. That weird cat meme where he's T-posing. Uh it's really interesting. Um I know I've talked about it before, and it's like a big thing that I always say when people are like, "Oh, like identifying insects." Like, yeah, that's a thing. It's really difficult to identify insects because of how diverse they are. And I am always a really, really big proponent of identifying things from specimens and not just using photos as representation of things, because a lot of characters are underneath or are very, very small where you need a microscope to actually see them in detail. However, because a lot of those characteristics are small and you're not usually able to see them without the microscope, uh, a lot of bug ID that I do nowadays is like almost 100% vibe based. Uh, I help admin a couple of pretty big insect ID groups on Facebook, and we get thousands of submissions of people who are like afraid of bugs and basically like, hey, what's this pixel on my wall? But using context clues, where it was found, when it was found, what it's doing, like even the vague outline of it, um, you can still get a pretty good ID. Like if someone's requesting like, hey, what is this thing? And I can tell that it's a ground beetle, but I can't tell you which of the 40,000 plus species of ground beetle that it is. Telling someone that it's a ground beetle is still more information that they had when they came to you, right? They can look into it more on their own, and usually most people are pretty okay with that. The big questions they want to know is like, is it dangerous? Is this dangerous to me, my kids, or my dog, or whatever? And that's really mostly what they want to know. And so I've seen some horrendous, horrendous bug photos in my day. People still send them to me. I get that thing where instead of people from high school that I haven't talked to since we graduated going, oh, hey, do you want to join my pyramid scheme? They'll message me and be like, hey, how's it going? Like, hope you've been well. It's been a really long time. And I'm just like, just send me the bug picture, man. Like, I know exactly what you're asking me for here, and it's totally fine. Like, I understand that my job is very unique, and like, not everybody has an entomologist on call, but I'm like, it's fine. We don't have to like fake the pleasantries of you actually caring how I've been over the last like 10 plus years. Just send me the picture of the bug. I'm more than happy to tell you what it is. Uh, and so like from doing that and doing all these IDs online, like you get a pretty good sense of what things are. without actually being able to see those diagnostic characters. And the more you learn to identify things, the more things you learn, like, oh, okay, I took the time to actually key this out and identify it from an actual specimen. So I've seen it under the microscope. I know what characters I'm supposed to look for, but now I'm seeing it from a photo that I don't have all of that access to. And you can start to build this like reference database basically of like, okay, I know what a ladybug is. I know I've seen this one before. It matches up with this species that's in this area at this time of year. I'm not like 100% confident, but I'm pretty sure it's, this species. Um, and again, most people are totally fine with that. That's like all you have to do. I'm sure I know Amanda's still here. Like I'm sure people know that Amanda works with animals, so like they find an animal outside or they have like a pet question, they'll slide in and be like, "Hey, how's it going? Oh my god, it's been so long since we've talked. Can I ask you this oddly specific question because you're like the only person I know that works with animals?" And it's the same thing for bugs, Nobody else, they don't have another person that they can message about bug ID because not everybody knows an entomologist. Yeah, yeah, so I was right. Amanda says yes. Yeah, Granny said, very rarely will someone need to know the exact species. You shoot from the hip. Um, yeah, I do. That's, they sometimes, especially like if Cricket's still here or anybody else that does macro photography, I'm sorry for the generalization that I'm about to make, but they will post a super close up photo where you can like just barely see a part of the insect. And they're using it to flex their macro capabilities, which is very cool. I love macro photography. But there's like a disconnect where they're excited about the pictures they're taking and not necessarily about the organisms. And so I'm like, yeah, this is a great picture. Can you send me one of like the whole bug and I'll be able to tell you what it is? And a lot of the time, like, we do get pushback from that sometimes. Like, they're like, I don't understand why you can't identify this species. And I'm like, sir, you've given me like the eye. I can tell you that it's a beetle, but I can't tell you much more than that. So I have run into instances where people do want an exact species ID, and it's not possible because of the photo that you've sent. But a lot of the time, Granny was right. Like, people don't care. They're like, again, they care if this thing is venomous or if it's going to hurt them or their pets or their garden or whatever. And so, like I said before, just telling them that something is like a scarab beetle, or like a ladybug or a silk moth, that is more information than they had when they came to you. And if they ask a follow up, you can I'm very comfortable saying that's all I've got. Uh, Particularly with groups that I'm not super comfortable with, I can do I am by no shock a beetle guy. Beetles are my expertise. That is the group that I know better than anything else. But when I found Antdromeda, my ant that my friend brought me the other day, I had to outsource that. Obviously, I knew it was an ant. There's so many different ant species in the world, but they're all in the same family. And so like I knew it was an ant, but because I was trying to take care of this thing, I needed to know specifics about it. And so even I like outsourced that ID. I told you I messaged some ant people about it. Um, and so for the general public, or even someone who's just remotely interested, giving them some nugget of information is better than when they got to you. So in their mind, it's a win. And most of the time, if you explain that, like, hey, I can't get this to species because that genus has like 300 species in the US and I need to dissect them to be able to tell them apart, that's fine. They didn't know that. They didn't have really any idea of that, but now they do after asking about that. Phoenix, thanks for the sub. 17 months. Heck yeah. Birdologist, and that's why you come to Bug Hunt. You never know what we're going to cover. Sometimes it's talking about dissecting beetles, sometimes it's talking about uh, bugs in cheese, sometimes we're talking about insects mating, other times we're talking about how to interact with the general public. It all depends, and it all changes every week, basically, depending on what y'all want me to talk about. Flumgoon, what is the second most widespread insect? Can you elaborate on that question, please? I'm not like 100% sure what you wanted for that. Oh, insect family. So ants aren't the most widespread. Um, so there are, according to my quick Google search here, because I didn't know offhand, there's like 16,000 roughly species of ants. Uh, by like individual numbers, there are more ants than like anything else on the planet because some of them can live in colonies that have like millions and millions of ants in them. But ants are pretty ubiquitous. They are found in a lot of places and primarily in the tropics. They re they replace the skill set of like carrion beetles and a lot of flies. So in North America, at least, we have carrion beetles that will deal with all of our dead stuff. But in Central and South America, they are still there, but they're a lot rarer. And that's because all of the ant diversity that happens in the tropics, um, the ants will break down carcasses and stuff like that, like the beetles do up here. Um, so yeah, beetles are the most diverse group. After that, it is definitely going to be Hymenoptera, which includes all the ants, bees, and wasps. Um, Realistically, and I feel like I've talked about this before, um, Hymenoptera is probably the actual most diverse order. Uh, because of all the parasitic things that are like super, super tiny that we're like just figuring out now, and how parasites are usually so specialized that they go after very specific hosts. So uh there's a saying that people go that there's a parasitic wasp for every beetle. And I know we've talked about hyperparasitoids before, where there's like a parasitic wasp that parasitizes a parasitic wasp that is parasitizing a caterpillar. Um, so as of right now, beetles are the most diverse order of insect. The wasp people are like over 100,000 species behind in terms of like actually described diversity. Um, but in actuality, I think they probably are the most diverse. There just hasn't been as much work done with them. Um, and so yeah, beetles are really widespread. Ants are also really really widespread. They're found all over the place, except interesting and related to Alveus Book Club. I unfortunately missed the meeting earlier because I was at a workshop, but I was watching the VOD right before I started this. There are no ants in the Falkland Islands. There have been surveys done there for a very, very, very long time, and they have never found ants there. And that's super interesting because, as far as I know, literally everywhere else besides Antarctica has ants. Um, Even like Hawaii and all these native little, like tiny islands in the middle of the ocean, they have ants, but the Falkland Islands don't. No native ants in Greenland and Iceland either. Interesting. Granted, I did not know about that. But yeah, there was a project that I helped with a couple of years ago where people from my university were sampling down in the Falklands, and they used pitfall traps, which is typically how I collect ground beetles as well. And so they were sampling for trying to find ants, and they weren't finding any ants. But they did let me go through and identify the ground beetles for them, so that was pretty fun. Had to translate beetle keys out of Spanish to be able to identify those. Pickle Cat. Where do bugs go in the winter in places like North America or Russia where it snows for months out of the year? We have talked about this a few times before. I think maybe the VOD from 3 bug hunts ago will have information on that. The long, or I guess the very, very short answer is that they have different adaptations for it. Sometimes they will dig underground where it stays like just above freezing, or in places where it gets really, really cold, they go into like torpor or quiescence, which is sort of like the bug equivalent of hibernation. So they'll stock up on food, they will go underground, under a rock, under tree bark, somewhere where they can be protected, and slow their metabolism down a ton. So even their little tiny bodies, they uh, don't have a lot of processes to keep up in terms of like energy expenditure. They basically just keep the lights on, in terms of maintaining their body process. And a lot of them also have antifreeze proteins to some extent, where in their hemolymph, the insect equivalent of blood, these proteins like prevent it from freezing solid. Um, and as we've talked about before, there are insects that specialize in being out when it's cold. It all depends. Like I said even earlier tonight, insects have very few rules that are like 100% accurate all the time because there are so many exceptions. So there are a lot of them that will go into some sort of like diapause or hibernation for the winter. But there are other ones that are basically inactive all year round and then only come out as adults uh, when it's winter and when it's cold and when there is actually snow out. So I certainly don't mean to dismiss that question. There should be links and stuff that I've talked about before in the bug Discord if we have someone put that command in for me. There's a channel in there now that we made a couple weeks ago for the I think we called it the Chat Chats library, where I'll post links and stuff like that related to what we talked about that night. So tonight I'm going to see if I can find that spitting spider clip from a couple of months ago, the Jurassic Park thing, a little bit more about toxorynchites, and then also like if I can find anything on the like Hollywood film insect things. Well, thanks, Tortilla. uh, yeah, if you can't find it, that's all right. I'll look for it when I get home because I know someone I think someone DM'd it to me at some point. Um, oh, Granny, I have no clue. I am by no means a physiologist. I have taken insect physiology as a class, but internal processes like how they digest and how much calorie intake they need, um, I could not even begin to guess. We found Hank Jr. Bow, 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 bow. ending ending bug hunt on our steady friend who has been here through thick and thin, and even our coldest bug hunts will end tonight on Hank Jr. in the hay, in the pasture. Thank you, everyone. As always, enjoy coming to Bug Hunt. I love talking to you guys about this stuff, so thank you for being here. Thank you, Logan, for driving us around tonight. It's uh it's gonna get better soon in terms of finding bugs. Copium. hopefully soon. As it starts to warm up, we'll hopefully find some better stuff. But until then, thanks all. I will talk to you next week, and I will post those links in the Discord as soon as I get home after this. Have a great night, everyone.